I work for a company that used to test Doomsday inventions on a parallel version of Earth. The idea was that we would never face the apocalyptic aftermath of a failed experiment. They would. But when that world ended, something came back with us. Like each of you, I joined this agency for a reason. To advance our species, Director Stefan Blom announced at the monthly assembly. Mankind must experiment to avoid stagnating, but we are rarely permitted to do so. We are constricted by bumbling bureaucrats who care only about preservation. Conserving the status quo. They fear change, fear what it might mean for them. They do not understand that we will die if we do not take risks, which is why we owe our lives to Dr. Gerard Weston. Our esteemed physicist has found a way to pursue experimental projects without upsetting politicians and militaries. His latest achievement, the Weston Tunnel, has created a doorway to another universe, one with a parallel version of our world, Earth 2. There, we will conduct our supposedly dangerous work without putting Earth 1 at risk. And our leaders will see. Presidents, prime ministers, commanders. When we achieve results, they won't care about how we obtained them. They've never cared about their neighbors before, have they? Dozen Minus is a callous corporation in every universe. One linked to the British and American governments. Governments you might already despise in the public sphere. So you wouldn't want to know the dreadful things they do behind closed doors. Dozen Minus rarely conducts ethical experiments. Your leaders only care about money, and we only care about progress. Director Blom has only ever cared about progress, I should say. He ensures that politicians get their payday, and they mostly let him do as he pleases. Governments only expressed concern when we began to develop technology that threatened humanity's very existence. Of course, as Blom explained in his speech, world leaders think nothing of their neighbors. And Earth 2 was nothing more than a cluster of nations across the pond. The pond being that multiversal tunnel between one reality and another. Earth 2 became Director Blom's playground, a gargantuan laboratory for performing dozen minus experiments without repercussions. And when inventions were tested successfully, they were greenlit for use in our world. How do I fit into all of this? Well, my name is Adriano Rossi, and I was a computer programmer who worked on the Nervorum project. We were creating the world's first superintelligence, a conscious, self-teaching AI named Nerve. Science fiction made reality. Now, I know that AI has been snowballing over the last couple of years, but Dozen Minus has been ahead of the curve for decades. The Nervorum project was, actually near completion in the late 80s. This organization has always possessed technology beyond anything in the public realm. But Nerve was obstructed, was prevented from being born. The risk of humanity's extinction was, and still is, too high. Roadblocks prevented programmers from ever taking that final step, from creating a self-sustaining, inorganic intelligence capable of growing itself. A digital mind. And that was why Dr. Gerard Weston changed everything. When he developed that tunnel to a parallel version of Earth in 2015, Director Stefan Blom saw an opportunity to finally test numerous deadly devices, inventions with the potential to end the world. After all, politicians were no longer concerned when somebody else's world was in danger. We began by investigating the Dozen Minus of Earth 2, seeing whether that parallel agency had also developed a tunnel, one that would risk Earth 1. But there was no Dr. Gerard Weston in that alternate world, thankfully. Earth 2 was vastly different. Politically, culturally, historically. Dozen Minus existed, but not in the same manner. After that, we threw all we had at the parallel world. Deadly experiment after deadly experiment. And when Earth 2 survived one project, we moved straight on to the next. In early 2024, the Nervorum project reached the top of the list. It was approved for testing. Helen Harding and I stepped through Weston's tunnel into that parallel world, and we prepared to become gods. In the banal setting of a hotel room, we set up a potentially cataclysmic device, a slim, rectangular gadget that held Nerve on its hardware. That digital brain had existed in some form for nearly 30 years, being tweaked and improved by each new influx of geniuses. A collection of binary commands waiting for some courageous, or foolish, Dr. Frankenstein to yank the lever. "You need to let it go," Helen said. She'd read the slight frown on my face. The slight sign of humanity. Only I seemed to see Earth 2 as a real place. A planet barely different from ours. One teeming with life. Human beings in a drastically different world, but human beings, nonetheless. I wondered whether the haggard expressions on those parallel faces had anything to do with previous experiments that Dozen- had conducted on Earth too. Reckless tests that, whilst not world-ending, might have ruined life for the inhabitants of that alternate planet. After all, from the moment of arriving, I'd certainly noticed that the parallel world felt a little grittier and grimier than Earth one. At least Nerve has finally improved this world, I thought. We finally made things better. That wouldn't last, of course. Who are you? Asked the parallel Adriano in a microphone outside the room. Calling him Adriano is still strange. He looked like me, but he wasn't me. He was the possibility of another life in another world. That was what I told myself to make it all feel less real. To make myself feel less culpable for the innocent lives that we had put in jeopardy by unleashing the artificial intelligence upon Earth too. Don't tell them anything, my Helen whispered to me. We know that you're us, her other self said aggressively. We have eyes. We just want to know how you came to be here, my parallel self added. How did you enter our world? You've already shared one piece of technology with us. Why won't you share more? Let both of our worlds prosper. We should be sharing things from both sides. They don't want to share, came Stefan Blom's voice from the speaker. Nerve was not a gift to our world. It was a shot in the dark that, fortunately for us, did not misfire. And it wasn't the first time that your world waged war on ours, was it, Mr. Rossi? I paused for a moment, struggling to process the fact that there were two versions of Adriano Rossi. Two versions of me. My mind whirred from the impossibility of the situation and the head trauma inflicted by the hotel intruders. Mr. Rossi, Blom pressed, tell your other self the truth. Either kill us or let us go. Helen screamed. We don't work for you. That isn't true, the director replied, a hint of giddiness in his voice. And I would very much like to meet this other me. Though I'm certain, if he shares even a droplet of my will, that meeting would not end well for one of us. We should work together, the parallel Helen pleaded. There are clearly many differences between our worlds. We may have things to teach you too. We've been here for years. We know all there is to know about your world, I said bluntly, eyeing the parallel version of myself. I resented him for some reason. A reason just out of grasp. It wasn't the disheveled beard. Not his weathered skin. It was something in that other Adriano's eyes. An emotion that was easy to discern. After all, he wore an expression that I was capable of wearing on my own face. The look of judgment. It looks like you've got something you want to get off your chest, I said. We've been your guinea pigs, haven't we? My alternate self asked. I smiled. It has nothing to do with you. This is about progression. It's always about progression. I'm sure it's the same with your man upstairs. I'd wager that Blom has the same cold heart in every reality. Careful, the director warned. We trial unstable things far from our world, I explained. Somewhere that doesn't risk our world. No, only ours, the parallel Helen whispered. And I don't blame you, Director Blom said. There's no need to keep secrets, Mr. Rossi. I don't seek revenge. I'm not looking to ruin your world. Quite frankly, I'm not that sensitive. I simply want a laboratory of my own. You understand that, don't you? Show me how to create a portal of my own. How to find a parallel reality to conduct our own experimental projects. No, my alternate self interjected. I want these invaders out of our world, and I don't want them to ever return. And they need to help us kill Nerve, the parallel Helen said. Kill him before he mutates into something else. In the space of 2 months, Nerve has set our world on the path of becoming a utopia, Director Blom said. Our multiversal guests may not have been intended for Nerve to be a gift, but happy accidents happen, Ms. Harding. I could see my parallel self clenching his fists, halting himself from expressing his true thoughts to the unfeeling employer, whose disembodied voice filled that prison. Director Blom would have happily sacrificed every human on his own planet in the name of greatness. Never mind a parallel one. Please just let us go, Helen whimpered. Our alternate selves wore soft expressions. They were eyeing us, their imprisoned versions, with great sorrow. Despite the untold differences between our two realities, they still, inevitably, saw themselves in our faces. "We should release them," the other Helen said. "They're not going to tell us anything." "They're quiet today," Director Blom admitted. "But they might talk in a week." I knew that was no figurative turn of speech. Helen and I were promptly plunged into darkness, and we lived that way for days. Barely existed in a lightless prison cell, with nothing to do but scream into the nothingness of our cell, lose our minds to existential dread. And the only thing to break up the monotony of each black day was a daily meal. However, the terror of that nightmarish cell paled in comparison to what followed. The sound of overheard rumbling woke Helen and me, the roar of more than something dreadful happening in the building. It was a tremor that seized the earth itself. Helen and I may have tried to look at one another for comfort. It was impossible to say in that darkened existence, and neither of us said a word to one another. We were either stunned into silence by fearful anticipation or unable to speak as the result of that inhumane isolation. "Adriano Rossi," came the jittery voice of Director Blom over the speaker. "Helen Harding." I only knew that the man hadn't abandoned us for a week, as he initially promised, because I'd counted 4 meals. But believe me when I say that 4, or 4.5, days in unlit solitude will drive a person to insanity. Gates were open to caverns of the mind that are better left closed, better kept from the conscious brain. "Stop toying with us," I whispered. "Just end this." "What are they?" he cried. I frowned and paused for a moment. I didn't understand, and Helen wasn't saying a word, so I was more concerned that she might no longer be alive at all. I listened attentively until I was certain I'd heard her breathe in the darkness. "They say nerve won't stop," Blom continued quietly, voice half drowned by the quakes from above. "They say it will destroy this world, every other world. It'll devour the universe itself. That's why they came here." "Who came here?" I asked, gripping the edge of my bed frame for support. "I don't. They're going to kill it, just like they killed their own unholy creation of organic matter. Killed it just before it managed to assimilate the universe itself," Blom said. "Take it back, Mr. Rossi. Kill it, please, before they destroy everything." I was bewildered. I hadn't thought that the director could fear anything. "They're going to exterminate us, Mr. Rossi," he yelled. "Make sure we won't be around to create it again." I was on the verge of asking half a dozen questions when there came both a crash and a sliver of light from the corridor, the first light in 100 hours. Helen released a deranged moan of joy, sadness, and fear, all 3 in one. Then a torch beam bounced along the hallway, and muffled footsteps followed. 2 figures rushed past our window pane, then one swiped a card to unlock the door. "Let's go," my parallel self, torch in hand, barked. Helen and I did not need to be persuaded, though our bodies were weakened by what we'd endured. The 2 of us waddled slowly towards the doorway, blinded by the relentless glare of the torch. We struggled to orient ourselves for a good minute, but our parallel selves didn't wait for us to realign ourselves. They had already seized our upper arms and shepherded us along the hallway, dragged us towards freedom. I recognized the corridors of the building's east wing. It did not seem to noticeably differ from Dozen- headquarters back on Earth. Not until we'd reached the well-lit ground floor lobby. The building had a glazed front wall which stretched from one side to the other, and from the tiles to the towering ceiling. Through the enormity of those many connected windows, which formed the entire front face of the 4-story building, I saw a parallel Birmingham. But that cityscape differed greatly from the one back home. The sky was painted with prickly, plummeting balls of dark blue, an invasion of color raining upon the earth. And through the thickness of that alien rain, I saw the outline of the city, saw 2 skyscrapers leaning against one another like pillars in a house of cards. Elsewhere, buildings both tall and small either lay in ruins or released thick plumes of smoke into the sky. The city, quaking endlessly, was on fire. "What is happening?" Helen asked quietly, eyes wide and lost. "They're here," my parallel self said as we navigated the lobby of screaming, fleeing employees. "It won't be long until everything is gone. Every place they've hit has vanished within an hour." "I'm not coming with you," the parallel Helen said. "I have to find them." "Liam and May?" my Helen feebly asked, Naming her own children. Her alternate self nodded. Go, Helen said. No, just wait. My other self begged before turning to me. You're going to open that tunnel and take us with you. I scoffed. Don't even. We saved your lives, he growled. They would have killed you. And they still might if we don't leave before this world dies. Dies? Helen croaked. They came in the night, her alternate self whispered as she started to break away from the group. I have to go, Adriano. Helen, please. My parallel self pleaded. I'm sorry, she softly said. I hope you make it. Then Helen's alternate self merged with the scattering dozen minus workers and rushed through the front doors. Fuck, he yelled, looking at me with enraged eyes. You did this. You brought them to. We have to do it now, Helen told me, interrupting my other self's breakdown. Not until we get rid of him, I replied, nodding at my parallel form. Then came a blinding light and a cataclysmic boom from a mile away. A small ball of white, produced by some weapon from another planet, engulfed the city center. I'm not dying here, the parallel version of myself snarled. Just open the fucking tunnel, Adriano. No, I said. Just do it. Helen whimpered as the three of us watched apocalyptic shapes emerging from the aftermath of that white explosion. Are you really going to let us die here just to stop him from coming back with us? You'll have to kill me, the other me growled, shifting anxiously on his feet and eyeing the stairs in the distance. Don't tempt me, I said. You're waiting for someone, aren't you? Helen suddenly asked him. Who is it? Then my other self raised an eyebrow and nodded at me, waited for the two of us to come to some seemingly obvious conclusion. Then he nodded his head in understanding. You never met her, did you? He asked. Molly, the technician from the third floor? I replied. His eyes widened, observing me with complete revulsion. She's more than that. You really aren't me, are you? He whispered. Adriano, screamed a voice from behind us. A frazzled woman sprinted across the lobby alongside the final fleeing employees. Molly was only an acquaintance to me, but it was clear from the embrace that she shared with the parallel Adriano that things were very different on Earth too. What took you so long? The other me asked her, near hysterical. He wouldn't let us leave until we locked down the BRX prototype, she wailed, eyeing Helen and me with fearful eyes. And what are you doing with them? Convincing them to do it, he explained. Molly clearly understood what he meant. Adriano. I'm serious, the other me continued. This is our world, she said. I'm not leaving it. I nodded. Listen to her. Shut the fuck up, the other me screamed. Sweetheart, please. We're going to die here. On the news, they said that America, China, Japan, France, and... I know what they said, Molly interrupted, caressing his face. But we don't belong in their world. Just like they don't belong in ours. Let them go home. Stay here with me. My parallel self wailed. But none of this is right. None of this was ever supposed to. The shattering of glass silenced him, and we all turned to face the horrendous thing that Director Blom had feared. A creature not from a different universe, but from a different planet. One many light years away. An individual from a large alien species hell-bent on ensuring that humanity did not repeat its mistakes. Ensuring that our artificial intelligence would not achieve the unthinkable, eradicating all organic things from all corners of reality, then consuming the very universe itself. It was more than a tall thing. The creature with royal blue flesh filled half of the room. To its eyes, the humans at its feet, or limbs, must have been little more than small rodents. The creature did not seem to have arms and legs. 20 or so appendages sprouted from the outer edge of its circular body, which was no more than a humongous face. One with polished squares for eyes, or sensory organs of some kind, and a black, toothless maw. A featureless abyss large enough to consume most things on Earth. But the alien did not strike with its open jaws, which spoke a silky, melodic series of words in some foreign, sing-song language. Rather, the awfully beautiful being attacked with one of its many appendages. A predatory limb with a pointed tip that stretched a staggering distance. The living weapon met its mark before I'd even blinked. My other self unleashed a sound beyond animalistic, and I felt his horror in his core. as if we had become intertwined. It was a wail of unfiltered agony and fear. Molly's bleeding form had been skewered on a blue limb and flung 50 feet to the side of the large room. The limp corpse landed with a resounding collection of cracks, which hopefully ended her pain immediately. "Quickly," I whispered to Helen, who was fiddling with a device on her wrist to open the tunnel. "He's distracted." And then the alien's choral chittering ceased. Its many square sensors rotated towards me, as did the two eyes on my parallel self's face. His red, puffy eyes looked vacant. He had not accepted it, that Molly was gone. Those parallel eyes of mine had switched off. "Where is the creator?" sang the creature's deafening voice in perfect English. I realized, then, that the alien hadn't accidentally stumbled into Dozen Minus. It had come specifically to that building. It was hunting those responsible for creating the artificial intelligence, those with the brains to do it again. Helen and I were hardly the creators, but I'm sure that wouldn't have made any difference to the murderous beast. "Helen," I whispered as my colleague shakily tapped the watch screen. Then came a familiar groan, the sound of reality itself unzipping, and there opened a thin, oval doorway, shaped like the white of an eye visible through semi-parted lids. Through that gateway, I saw a short blackened tunnel, followed by a second doorway, one that revealed the bright colors of that near-identical lobby from Earth 1. Only, that reality's lobby did not sit at the heart of a destroyed city. It was full of excitably chattering Dozen Minus workers. The image was a little blurry, of course, as if looking through a stained glass window, but it was undeniably there. "What is that?" whispered the titanic alien upon seeing that opening to another universe. "Which of you did this? Tell me before I puncture you." I heard rapid footsteps, and I swiveled to see my parallel self seizing his chance. But I threw an arm in his way, bringing that other Adriano and myself crashing to the tiles. The two of us tussled on the floor, flailing a series of equally determined punches and winding one another. But I prevailed and started to wrap my hands around the neck of that other me. Started to watch his soul vacate his body. "Be with Molly," I whispered. "Adriano." Helen screamed. An unprecedented weight clunked the back of my head, and I was sent sideways, sent sprawling across the floor, clutching my burning skull. Helen hadn't been screaming my name. Her allegiance had shifted to the other Adriano. "You bitch!" I grunted as I clambered weakly to my feet. "I'll—" My sentence closed with a splutter of blood from my half-open lips, and when I looked down, there was a blue limb protruding from my chest. A pointed tip that had torn through my back, had punctured me and come out of the other side. Moments later, I flew upwards, watching the two figures below fade into blackness. And then I died, though I've not been entirely forthcoming with you. You see, I am Adriano Rossi, but I am not from your Earth. I am the Adriano who ran screaming in terror, alongside Helen Harding, from the roaring beast. The one who sprang through Weston's tunnel as some abominable alien hurled several of its limbs towards us. The creature narrowly missed our fleeing forms, and we sealed the tunnel. Sealed ourselves in Earth 1. Your Earth. Things aren't so simple, however. Yes, I am that Adriano from Earth 2, but something happened when I entered this world. A horror beyond existential, beyond anything human. I'm still me, but I gained your Adriano's memories. His feelings. His fears from that awful day. His last ever day. My mind is both mine and his. I'm sure your Adriano and your Helen felt it when they first entered Earth 2. We were not made to wander between realities. I think Molly might have been right. I should have stayed on Earth 2. Should have died with that reality. Since that day, many months ago, I've counted my blessings that I inherited parts of your Adriano. Not the bad parts, I hope, but enough to pass as him in the eyes of Dozen Minus leaders. Then again, perhaps they do not care. After all, Adriano would hardly be missed. He wasn't a good man, and I should know. I am him in many ways, but in other ways, I am not. And whilst I continue to work for this company, in this foreign world, I will strive to be better than the man I have replaced. Strive to do more than simply slip neatly into this reality, which differs so greatly from my dead one. I will bring this organization to its knees if I must. I will make your world better. Make sure it does not meet a similar fate to mine. I just have to remain focused. It is painful to be with your Molly again. She is so like the wife I lost in my old world, but that Molly died. I won't convince myself otherwise. And I'm trying hard to pull away from her. In spite of our natural attraction, there are things which demand my attention. Your Stefan Blom, though he is not foolish enough to reopen the tunnel to Earth 2, has not abandoned his quest to ruin other worlds. He has not learned his lesson. I know that he and Weston are developing a tunnel to find another parallel Earth. A new one for them to destroy. They will never stop. They'll find 1,000 new realities, 1,000 new experimental grounds. And when they've burnt all of those to the ground, leaving no alternate Earths left to ruin, I fear what follows. Fear that Director Blom won't hesitate to do what he most likely has always wanted to do. A terrible end that he will pursue simply because he can. The end of your world,